Hang on. There we go. It thinks that I've got a new keyboard, which is bullshit, so let me just fix that. So yeah, morning everyone. There are going to be a bunch of people coming, I think, based on how it's been so far. If some of you want to just like shift in a little bit, it'll make it a lot less disruptive. I know that you treasure your aisle seats, but sorry, the conference organizer and me just can't stop, can it, Paula? I apologize. So yeah, I'm Meri. I'm the CTO at Pleo at the moment, although we've just announced this week that I'm leaving at the end of the year, and going to take some time off. So don't follow me on LinkedIn unless you want to see lots of pictures of turtles. And I'm going to talk a bit about how we've been implementing a platform engineering approach at Pleo over the last few years. But yeah, first of all, I'm Meri, I'm a CTO. I've been CTO at a number of places. I was at GovUK back in the day. I have been in various big corporations, and then Monzo, Healx, and Pleo as well. My weird claim to fame is I built part of South Africa's first satellite as a teenager. So who of you have got kids? Loads of you. Don't let your kids do anything cool when they're young. I sold the something that went into space when I was 16. It's all been fucking downhill since then, right? So just don't let them do anything cool when they're young. That's my excellent parenting advice to start you off this morning. So I am very aware that I'm at a team topologies conference, and so I don't need to define platform team for you. But I just thought I should at least give a nod to the fact that this is very deliberately about platform teams. We do have stream-aligned teams and enabling teams and complicated subsystem teams, but I'm not gonna talk about those. I'm just gonna focus on the platform side. And I arrived at Pleo about 3 years ago and found that they had already attempted to do something along the lines of platform engineering, but they called it product development enablement, which both doesn't roll off the tongue and sort of was a misnomer in terms of what type of teams they were. And one of the biggest gripes that I heard from the engineers in those teams when I joined was that they were sick of not writing any code. To which my reaction was, I'm sorry, what the fuck? How have I got 20 engineers not writing code and upset about it in this platform area? And it amazed me to find that the majority of them were just writing processes and documentation, and they were trying their hardest to give everybody every option available rather than choosing to be opinionated in the platform. And so we had quite a serious conversation about it. It helped that the engineers hated it, if I'm really honest. I wasn't the rampaging new CTO coming in going, what the hell, given that the teams were already fairly unhappy about it. But we, quite early on in my tenure there, changed that perspective and decided that the platform teams really should be owning products rather than processes. And they, as I said, they were trying really hard to give maximum optionality to every product team rather than trying to say, this is the good way to do it this way and you get a load of stuff for free. And that had led to quite a lot of sprawl and dissatisfaction and a lot of distraction from customer needs. When I asked these teams what was most frustrating or challenging for the product teams, they literally had no idea. They were too busy writing Notion docs to talk to any of their customers. And so both they felt like they were drowning, but everybody else felt like they were drowning as well. And so we refocused and said, okay, let's not go to standards because everybody chafes against standards, right? As the sooner you say something has to be done, the more likely somebody is to say, no, thank you. I don't know if that's because of the level of neurodiversity in engineering. As somebody with autism and ADHD, oppositional defiance disorder is not very far away from that. And so I think that there is a tendency to just go, I ain't doing what you told me just because you told me in many engineering teams. But we said, okay, let's talk about sensible defaults instead. Let's say if there's no reason not to, then do it this way. And this way will make enough of a golden path that you can trust that you're getting quite a lot for free by just adopting the tool. By just doing it the way that everybody else does it. You will get monitoring, alerting, observability, logging, a whole bunch of stuff will essentially come for free, including scaling your infrastructure for you accordingly. We decided that should be enshrined in platform products, and possibly a little separately, but related, there was a real culture of building absolutely everything, which I think is really common in startups that have grown fast, because things feel really expensive in the early days. 100K feels like a lot until you realize it took 3 engineers to keep that thing going that you could have just paid 100K for. That sort of thinking I just repeatedly find doesn't happen in early stage companies. And so we said, let's really try hard to make much more active buy versus build decisions. And let's only customize and be specific where we are really sure that it's worthwhile. Like, there's not much of a platform at a fintech company that needs to be special, particularly when you're doing basically expenses people don't hate, which is what Pleo does. I do think making an expense app that people don't hate is quite an achievement, so please don't see that as dismissive at all. So we started by, even though everybody was dying from process, by articulating some process. We have a database called How We Build Things, and we enshrined all these golden paths and sensible defaults in these products, so aiming to provide something as a service rather than the maximum optionality that they were attempting to provide previously. And that, predictably, is in Notion and is now quite big and maybe a little unwieldy, but continues to be really useful and continues to be quite a focus of our onboarding for new engineers and product managers and designers. And we, with that, articulated these 6 principles, which were in the early days. So I joined at the same time as a new chief product officer, and we really wanted to get across the change that we were trying to make without making it too overwhelming for people. And so we rolled out these sets of processes and descriptions of how we built things along with these 6 principles. So first was to build for humans, which sounds really simple, but isn't. To focus on impact, so what's the outcome rather than what's the output. And again, there was a lot of measuring features deployed rather than impact gained at the time. The biggest architectural change we made was to say, okay, we're going to build everything API first, which I appreciate sounds like a late 90s strategy, but it was much needed, I promise. Make quality your business, which I think this sort of audience is very familiar with. Treat data as a product, and then think safe and secure. And that last one was also quite interesting. We had a really good relationship with the Danish FSA, the equivalent of the Financial Conduct Authority here in the UK. But because of Brexit, we needed to get a UK license as well now. And so getting the teams to think about regulatory concerns, to imagine what the regulator's response would be to things and so on, was suddenly much more important than it had been. I'm not calling the Danish FSA soft, but they're soft. Compared to the FCA, they are much more easygoing, shall we say. And so we created this platform area, which was largely just assembling a set of teams that already existed and rebranding them and giving them a different mission. And so at the front end, we have a team called Web Core, which is just the web framework, Mobile Core, predictably the mobile framework, and then a design system team. We include payments in our platform. And so we have a financial core team which looks after the ledger, payment infra, and then payops and partnerships, which is a more operational team. And that's been one of the interesting experiences actually of this, is having ops teams, and I mean business ops teams, not operations engineering teams, included in this meant that we had to flex the definition of the team a little bit. We're a little off the archetype in some ways because of that. And then the more back-end side, DevX, back-end core, auth, security, and then a team that call themselves SRE, however much I wish they would call themselves infrastructure. But they also once found the Google Meet strawberry what's it called? Filter. And they now call themselves Strawberry number 1 through 9, which is, the calling themselves SRE is the least inexplicable thing about this particular team, which is full of character, but a little random. And Joanna is sat right in front of me, who leads that team, so I'm finding this quite a weird talk to give directly in front of her. I also put a VP of product in charge of this area. And that might seem a odd choice, but we really, really wanted to have a change in mindset and approach to become much, much more product focused and to think of these platforms as internal products. And this is his name's Stefan Christensen. This is the scorecard he used very publicly with the entire set of, this is about 80 people once you include all of the different areas, to articulate what mattered as a collection of teams in terms of them maturing. So wanted to make sure that it was practical, tangible, and understandable direction, that we had strong foundations to get the basics right, so making sure we had enough people managers and enough pastoral care and that kind of stuff. Motivated individuals in high-performing teams, I think, speaks for itself. Leadership being treated like a team game, like everything else. And then high expectations, but there to help. And so one of the things that I really liked at the point that I joined Pleo is they have this approach of they don't have status meetings, they have support meetings. And just calling it a support meeting instantly changes how the executives interact with it. And it's been quite nice to see that come to life and to watch those teams feel like they're a lot less like they're reporting on what they've done and a lot more like they're coming to get help or discussion or similar. I do think there's obviously an onus on leadership to treat it that way, but just the naming has helped. And so, reflecting on the last few years, what worked really well was the approach of thinking of it as a product, thinking of these platforms as something as a service that limited options rather than expanding them. This set of teams has gotten much better at doing customer and user research. They've partnered with our research and design colleagues to learn a bunch of kind of guerrilla research techniques. So they'll do interviews, they'll go and embed in a team for a week to see what's frustrating for them and that kind of stuff. Do the thing right, do the right thing and do the thing right, and you'll get a bunch of stuff for free, really worked with the broader engineering organization. They had been drowning in all of the options that they'd been provided with by these teams that had largely been writing extensive Notion documentation rather than creating platforms that could be used. And in particular, it reduced CV-driven development a lot in the organization as well. It became much less okay to just choose something new because you wanted something new, and much more of a conversation we would have. We also instituted an architecture board, but I can talk about that separately if anybody's interested. Building for a concrete specific need first and then generalizing also helped. There were a couple of times we had to intervene with teams that were trying to build for everything all at once in a very long-winded fashion rather than trying to be specific at first. And then I think the thing that has probably been the biggest impact, if you asked the average engineer in my org, is that there's now one front door for users. So anything you want out of payments, infrastructure, or developer experience in any way, you can come to one area. You don't have to care about which of those sub-teams is looking after the thing. You can just come to platform and platform will figure it out internally who to send your query to. And I think we all know that it's better to build and then refactor and let the platforms emerge, but I think it's still sometimes tough to do that in practice. I think making sure that you spend time understanding what is working and what isn't working and building on that, it's really easy to miss that step or to not spend enough time on it or to overgeneralize from early on. What didn't work? A fair bit. We started off with quite traditional product managers in these teams. one spread across 2 or 3 teams, because these teams are quite small in terms of number of engineers. And they were very well intended, but many of the techniques that they had for leading and managing a product aren't super useful when you have a user population of 200 engineers rather than 200,000 engineers. And so, like I said here, experiments where you need high volume statistical significance are not super useful in that kind of setting. Many of the product managers, even when we tried to look for people who were more technical, it was a struggle to find folks who were technical enough to be the PM for, you know, the internal developer portal or various other parts of the experience. We've also struggled with areas like authentication and authorization to find somebody who's good enough at the security side and good enough at the user experience side to really define what's needed well. We struggled a bit with teams slipping back into enablement mode, into thinking, well, if I just, you know, if we build it, they will come. If we define it, they will obey. Obedience is not often the result of Notion documentation, is, I suppose, a key learning here. And then one thing that, when I compared notes with Stefan, the VP of product who runs this area, and asked him what he thought had gone well, he said he thought that it didn't work well when we were trying to track percentage completion of OKRs. And so we moved the teams to giving us confidence levels instead. How confident are you that you'll get this done by the end of the quarter, by the end of the half? And that somehow moved us away from having lots of arguments about how useless estimation is and into some good conversations about whether we could rely on something being done or not. And so I think that's a valid point as well. What ended up happening? Over the last 3 years, we're doing 450% more work, is what Swarmia reassures me. It feels like 3 times as much, for sure. And maybe it's 4.5 times as much, I'm not sure. And we went from a cycle time of over 5 days down to, this shows you an average of 3.2 days over the last 3 years. But as you can see from the graph, it's definitely, you know, it's trending down and there's fewer spikes now. And the one on the right is definitely trending up. And so that headline of an investment in platform helping us to achieve, you know, 3 to 4 times as much work in 40% faster time has been really helpful. I appreciate that these are DORA metrics, and it's really easy to poke a hole in them. But the thing I love about the DORA metrics, though, is even when engineers try to game it, they accidentally help themselves. Oh no, you divided your work into more PRs, and so it looks like we're doing more work because we have more PRs. Alas, alack, right? Oh no, you've divided things up so that you can get them done in a couple of days rather than 5 days. You know, it is genuinely one of the things I appreciate the most about DORA metrics is that even if people go, oh, this is all bullshit, you're measuring my work, lines of code is bullshit, blah, 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 even if they try to game it, they help themselves. And I think that's really, really positive. The one caveat is that we did do a lot more in addition to this platform engineering approach. There's no way I can stand up here with a straight face. I mean, I don't have a straight face anyway, let's be honest. But there's no way I can stand up here and say that this was all due to the platform engineering approach, but it definitely helped. We also did a lot of upskilling of engineers. If anybody wants to talk about how to upskill 200 engineers who were hired as JavaScript engineers and then the company moved to Kotlin for some God's beknownst reason, come and see me afterwards. We did this big architectural change of building API first. We worked really hard to be much more closely aligned with product on the actual like customer-facing side of things. We put work in place limits in, and it was really common when I joined for there to be 6 priorities for a team of 6 engineers, and everybody essentially working on their own thing. So I really don't underestimate how much just going, hey, maybe you should work on 2 things as 6 people rather than 6 things as 6 people helped. And in terms of what's next, we've decided that trying to have traditional product managers isn't working well for us. not least because the definitions of how to do product management well in their career paths doesn't lend itself to this kind of product role. In another organization that was a bit bigger, I might have said we needed a technical product manager career path. In this one, we're small enough that we think what we want to do instead is to enable our engineers to lead with product thinking and product skills rather than having to make a move full-time into product. And given these teams are relatively small, their max is probably, outside of the infrastructure team, the biggest team is probably only 5 or 6 engineers. It's been very possible for somebody to be a hands-on engineer and the product lead for the area. I usually don't like mixing hands-on and management roles, but it's the one case where that's actually worked quite well. We're continuing to iterate and learn, and then we're about to bring our kind of internal tooling area into this platform structure as well. So everything that our customer service agents and customer ops and similar use, because they're increasingly wanting that to be AI enabled, and so we need to give them a bit of help. But yeah, it's been, as I said, a really interesting experience, and I think this is probably the thing I'm proudest of, is this massive improvement in throughput and speed over the last few years. And yeah, if anybody would like to chat about any of this, I'll be around until about lunchtime. I have to fly to New York this afternoon to speak at LeadDev in the morning, so apologies for not being here all day. And I really am gutted that I missed yesterday because it sounds like it was awesome. But yeah, please come and chat to me, and thank you very much.